in the MA program for Islamic Studies here at George Washington University. And finally, we will hear from James Pickett, who's a member of the faculty at the University of Pittsburgh and the author of Polymaths of Islam, Power and Networks of Knowledge in Central Asia with Cornell University Press. So Kathya, we'll start with you and work our way down.
Thank you for the presentation. And my presentation or my short thoughts and insight would be on considering the role of civil society organization in the changing context of post-Islamism. I think the closing remark of Professor Berrrada, we were stressing the importance that civil society can play in accompanying this transformation toward more of a post-Islamic reality. Why civil society and why does civil society matters to the discussion? Because first of all, of its nature as being more fluid, as appealing to the middle classes, but also in its capacity to transform something that looks very rigid, which is the academic knowledge, to something that speaks to larger audience and larger population. So I think, not because I am a civil society worker and expert, but rightly that civil society can play an important role in this post-Islamic era in most Muslim majority countries. The role that it can play can be twofold. So the first one is by being a Denkfabrik, as the German would say, or as a factory of ideas for political parties in Muslim majority world, which seems to really be in a stage of a complete fatigue and exhaustion of ideology, of new orientation. So how can think tanks in the region, how can civil society support the emergence of some kind of a new political discourse that would appeal to the youth and the young generation in the region who have developed a complete apathy to the political game. And the second part the civil society organization can play is by really thinking the social and the societal reforms that are generally linked to the Islamic law. So by here I am referring to marriage, for example, divorce, law of inheritance, that needs some kind of transformation in the Muslim majority countries, and that transformation is often linked to the reality and application of Sharia law. So what role can they play here? Sometimes the social and the societal part of civil society can play is of a sudden nature. So it's not often your usual suspect of the marriage, divorce, but goes to something beyond that, to the economic life, to the relationship that people in Muslim majority country have vis-a-vis the environmental crisis. So how can a form of Islamic ethics that can be developed by advocacy groups, civil society actors play in favor of advancing that discussion? The insight that I'd love to share comes from my home country, Morocco, but I'm sure with echo a lot of what you also have in other Muslim majority countries, though I love to think of my country with some form of singularity, maybe out of chauvinism, but also I think it's grounded enough that the understanding of religion in Morocco is somehow different. Morocco, or Maghreb in Arabic, bears its singularity in its own name. So Maghreb in Arabic is the most west point of the Islamic empire, if you want, historically. So that geographic difference meant that Morocco has developed its own flavor and understanding of Islam, which is not completely isolated from what happened in the centrality of the Mashreq, but still is somehow more local. This local aspect gives more, if you want more, yeah. Okay. So
I just need you to speak into the mics, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So that would mean that how does Islam means in the Moroccan context would be somehow different from what it means in the Mashreq. So before maybe talking about what civil society does play as a role in Morocco in that post-Islamic transformation, I'd like to give some kind of background, a very short one, on the milieu in which civil society organizations operate in Morocco. So Morocco is a monarchy. I mean, the prerogatives of the king are defined by the constitution. It makes that he has many titles, some of which are very common in all head of states across the world, and some are a little bit less common. So that would be, in this case, more relevant to our discussion, his title of Amir al-Mu'minin, or the Commander of the Faithful. The Commander of the Faithful is a religious title, but it's not at all symbolic. In most of the occasion, you hear that it's mostly a symbolic title. No, he can and does play a role of referee between different parties whenever there is an antagonistic discussion. So let's say there is a discussion today and now going on in reforming some kind of law that relates to marriage, to inheritance, and we are really coming at a point where the different parties cannot agree. That is the more traditional forces of society versus the more liberal and more progressive. At that point, he steps in to play a role of referee. So the power of Imarat al-Mu'minin is an actual thing, is a real thing, is not at all a symbolic thing. In most circles, it is seen as somehow positive because his role tends to be more on the moderate leaning side, so it kind of seen as a nice thing. So that's when it comes to the importance of the monarchy. The political parties in Morocco, there are multiple political parties. I really cannot count. I think they have more than 60 political party there is. But this plurality of number does not reveal anything of diversity when it comes to ideological positions, because if you read their political program, you will be surprised that they really look very similar. In Morocco, like in many other countries, in Muslim majority countries and outside, there is a true political apathy from the young generation, very low participation both in political election, but also as a member and as a part of political parties. And the elite on those political parties are often seen and perceived as very elitist, self-serving. So that means that civil society sometimes plays the role that political parties were supposed to play. Not out of kind of ideological orientation or choice, but as a de facto. I mean, people are disengaged from politics and they need to reorganize in some other spheres, and here civil society can play that role. Civil society in Morocco is very fragmented as well and extremely polarized. So you have the civil society that is, the majority of civil society would be constituted of grassroots organizations that work in mostly charity work, but also more recently into more advocacy, human rights group that works more in the promotion and advocacy for changes when it comes to women's status, human rights, more economic inclusion, the role of youth. Within the post-Islamism, discussions that we are having, what has been some of the role played by civil society organization? I have 3 examples in mind. One was on the countering violent extremism kind of vibe or fad or fashion, or you name it, because money was there for many organizations to work on the topic, so they jumped in and worked on the topic of countering violent extremism. So here, it is very hard to evaluate the impact of the work that they have been doing because of the centrality of the Imarat al-Mu'minin. Again, that's why it was, for me, important to emphasize that the religious sphere is somehow controlled by organizations that define itself at the heart of understanding, interpretation, and reforming the religious sphere altogether. So any kind of very profound discussion on reforming the religion would be at odds with the powers and prerogative of the king. As such, different civil society organizations would self-censor and would not engage too much on the reforming parts, because that would make them as a competitor to the king, thinks that they would not want to be in as a position. So the role that they played in the countering violent extremism was with, if you want, the second wave of countering violent extremism, or CVE. The first wave was called Muraja'a in Arabic, which was a revision. So it was all about inviting all the jihadi detainees to sit with themselves in prison and think it through and write some kind of long letters in which they would assume that they have reviewed their position on many things and that they change and they're able to change. as you may guess, it was not extremely successful. The second wave, which is called Musalaha translates in Arabic as reconciliation, that part, the role of civil society was more important, meaning that they were engaged in designing the de-radicalization programs. So that would be an example in which civil society organization played a role. Another one is, if you want, more sudden now, is that Morocco, as many countries in the region, is witnessing a true climate change, environmental crisis, and the issue of water management is becoming extremely important. So the Moroccan state is making, I would say, an intelligent use of the religious discourse that would look at water as something sacred, something from God, something very divine, to if you want to mobilize people to be part of this movement, and then using different civil society organizations to pinpoint and to portray and to advocate for this message. That would be, I mean, of course, there are many other areas in which the collaboration was between the state, civil society organizations was established to advocate for post-Islamism reform, but maybe we don't have time to dwell into that. The challenges that civil society face in terms of advocating for more of a post-Islamism has to do with the very nature of civil society itself. So the fact that they may be working on ad hoc topics dependent on the availability of funding does not allow them really to develop expertise on a topic, and sometimes make them look very bad as a rent-seeking kind of organizations who are just after the money. So that's an important point, sometimes does not help them really play the role for which they have the potential to make an impact. A second thing is that the level of polarization is so high between civil society organizations. So you have the civil society organizations that define themselves as more Western, defending liberal values, versus the ones that are linked directly or indirectly to more Islamist political parties or Islamist organizations, and the level of discussion between those ones is zero, as you can imagine. That level of polarization impacts really the opening of dialogue, the space for dialogue. So I would leave it here and would be happy to answer your question and engage in a Q&A.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, hello everyone. It's a great privilege to be here, and actually my background in philosophy and religious study gave me privilege to do something that looked like an exceptional and not norm. That is say about the ambiguity of the terms that we are using, Islamism and post-Islamism. So, as a philosopher and as a scholar of religion, we know we need to use terms to understand phenomena and to analyze and make conclusion and make decision. But at the same time, as academic, we need to be a little more accurate with the using terminology. So I would like to share some points about these terms and make a conclusion. The first thing that I would like to say is that both terms, Islamism and post-Islamism, actually has two sides. One is related to the epistemology, how scholars, how viewers, how outsiders wanted to see, and what they saw, and how they found them, and how they make a sense of them. Another aspect of that, what's were going on in Muslim country. Actually, these two aspects are related together. As we heard in the previous session, I think it's very, very important to understand Islamism as a kind of an Islamization that is in some way associated with Islamism. Is a modern phenomena. It's not very connected with the nature of Islam, if we can talk about nature of religion. And this phenomena was a reactionary phenomena to colonization and modernization. That's the one aspect we can talk more during Q&A, but that's it. My first point that I wanted to make. And it came from the mind of the people who wanted, we just heard that, so they just changed Islamism to Islam, and then Islam to Islamist again, and post-Islamist, because that they had some kind of the paradigms how to look at Muslim. There is elements of the Orientalism and colonizing power. All of them make a rule in this terminology. Also, I would like to emphasize that there was something in Muslims that was also reactionary, and many Muslims, they thought that they have problem. They are not developed as much as they wanted. They had the problem of the colonialism. They had the problem of the poverty. They have a lot of problem, political, social, in some way, educational, cultural. And they also reacted to the situation. And they got the idea that we can change a situation through power, getting the power, particularly political power, and this Orientalist viewpoint, and activists or people who were active in the field, both together helped to coin this term, Islamism, that we are talking about. But right now there is a change in the way that people look and analyze, and they prefer the word post-colonialism. And also there is a change in the way that people in this field, mostly they are functioning. So that's a change in both. It in some way lost a little, not fully, the reactionary aspect of that, the concept of the changing society from top-down approach, and to think that Islam is the answer for any question about life here and hereafter. That's the first point. The second point is that saying that this terminology has some kind of the ambiguity doesn't mean that we cannot use this terminology. But it means that we have to acknowledge that this is good for introduction, to learn about Muslim societies, about their past and about their current times. But if we think that it can help us to understand fully, that's something wrong. So neither Islamists nor post-Islamists can explain what's going on in Muslim country with regard to connection between faith and politics. That's the point that I'm saying. But we need it for the introduction to get a little learnable something. And this is not just about Islam. That's about religion. That's about humanities. That's about social science. We use a lot of time terminology to understand. Then we are obsessed with our terminology and we think this is what's in, and then we try to project what is in our mind to the reality. To give you an example, so everybody uses the terminology Shia, Sunni, and they think they are very, very distinct things. But we have many figures in Islam, we don't know really they are Shia or Sunni, and we cannot put them in one of these categories. Very important figures like Rumi or Avicenna or many other people. About Islamists, anybody says that the Iranian regime is Islamist. But personally, I believe there is a big difference between previous supreme leader of Iran and current supreme leader of Iran. So we cannot consider Khomeini Islamist in the meaning we consider Khamenei Islamist. For sure, they are not safe, and completely from the way they look at the government, theory of the Walayat Faqih, the way they look at the assembly of the expert to make interest of the community meet, and like that, they are completely different. And we cannot categorize all of them in one category and saying this is Islamist group. These are examples to say categorization, classification is good for introduction, but be aware, and we have to know that they cannot catch the whole meaning of things, and then we just think in that way. The big problem with categorization, particularly when we are talking about the Islam and Islamism and post-Islamism, is it's the essentialism in that. We think religion or religious activity has a particular nature, particular essence, And this terminology reflects that. And if we understand that, we understand that activities. There is a for sure reductionist approach and essentialist approach that doesn't meet requirement to understand different phenomena, particularly political phenomena in Muslim world. So again, this concept, I think, has the danger to put us in what in previous term was called Islamic exceptionalism. That's saying there is a very, very tight connection between Islam and politics, and there is a two-way. One way is that to identify them with each other, and another is that to break the connection and divorce Islam from politics. But that's not true. We can talk more about that. That's suffering from the essentialism and reductionism that is a very, very common. And the next point is that, of course, when we are talking about the Islamism and post-Islamism, we reduce Islam to the polity and equate the nature of Islam with politics. That's, I think, particularly shift from Islamist to post-Islamism help us to get a little rid of this problem if we don't equate post-Islamism with ignoring or forgetting politics. So that can be helpful if we consider that point. Other way, we still remain in the realm of the essentialism that doesn't catch the reality of what's going on in Islam. I would like to emphasize it's not just about the current time, even about the previous time. If you're saying Mujahideen, for example, or Muslim Brotherhood, or many other people, like even Hamas or Hezbollah and like that, they are just Islamists, and we can understand them based on their understanding of Islam. I think we are going in the wrong direction. That gives kind of idea that they are Puritan and they are pure Islamist group. That's not a reality. The next point is that moving from Islamist to post-Islamism, considering all these observations, help us see Islam in a broader context, that is Islamic activism. I love the terminology used in the previous session about Islamic activism. So if you want to understand what's going on in Muslim countries, even with regard to connection between religion and politics, we need to look at the Islamist group. That's the reality of these countries, but we have also Tablighi or propagations community. We have a terrorist group that they are part of the reality. We have collective actions rooted in Islamic symbolism and identities and like that. So we have inward-looking groups, we have study groups, we have charities, we learn about social welfare organization, and all these kind of things can show us how these people want to connect their religious identity or religious aspect of life with public sphere. The next point is that, so with regard to the death of the political Islam, I think that's a kind of the myth. We cannot accept that. Political Islam still is a reality, not just Taliban that got power, but in many other of the Islamist group particularly. Let's use that terminology. So that's a reality, but there is no doubt that it's not as strong as it was before, and they in some way change in some extend their ideology. So they align kind of the Islamist idea with pragmatist approach, with the realistic or looking at facts. And however, I think if we think Islamism is done, I think we ignore the connection between historical relationship between Islam and politics, the importance of the political politics and political power in view of Muslim and view of the non-Muslim. I will share my last point at the end at the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, I'll get started. In the interest of time, I'll get started without my slides. First of all, I'm just really honored to be here and my great thanks goes out to the people who organized this conference, and especially to Dr. Moradian for the invitation. So I'm a historian of Islam in Central Asia, and well, you would have noticed my first slide is the informal title of my presentation was going to be Islam before Islamism. So in a way, the inverse of this the mandate of this conference, and for that I apologize. But I do think that it'll be interesting to talk a little bit about pre-Islamism. That is Islam in Central Asia. Yes, it is. Thanks. And can I just through the slides with this? Okay. So that's what was Islam like in Central Asia, in this region that we're interested in, before that pesky ism at the end of it barged in uninvited. I should state from the outset that I'm an expert neither in Islamism nor modern Afghanistan, and on those topics we're lucky I can defer to many other esteemed colleagues in this room. However, in general, Islamism tends to refer to a broad rubric of ideologies that tend to look backwards in time to an imagined golden age to which Islam ought to return. Inevitably, the memory of what Islam was in the past is quite different from reality. And so I hope I might be able to shed just a little bit of light on what Islam was like in Central Asia back when the word Taliban referred to humble madrasa students rather than Kalashnikov wielding militants. These are sort of the original Taliban. My specific area of research focuses on Islamic scholars in Central Asia and what their understanding of Islamic government was like, especially from the 18th through early 20th centuries. The epicenter of most of my work is the college town of Bukhara, which is a city now located in Uzbekistan, but which was then the seat of an emirate in its own right. This is a heat map of the origins of different scholars who were the cream of the crop in Bukhara. Now, the city of Bukhara in the 19th century boasted over 200 madrasas, or Islamic colleges, which made it the educational hub of a region that went far beyond its own political borders, and as you can see it from this map, extended into what is now northern Afghanistan. I mention this to suggest that my findings about religion and politics in the cultural world of my primary sources, the cultural world of Bukhara, very much do apply to some of these conversations that focus more on Afghanistan. Students, or talibs, flock to Bukhara for their education, especially from places like Kunduz, Mazar-e-Sharif, Badakhshan, but also Kabul and Herat to a lesser degree. This gives you a sense of the political borders during the pre-colonial period in Central Asia. And I put this on the screen to emphasize that it's really not until the late 19th century that these emirates, these sort of small kingdoms in northern Afghanistan, were firmly integrated into the modern Afghan state. Before that, they were in Bukhara's orbit, both culturally, religiously, but also to a certain degree politically. Moreover, it's not until that background, that brief background offers you a sense of where I'm coming from, and how my research might relate to a topic much broader like that of this conference. So, in what remains of my very brief time, I'm going to advance a very simple argument and come at it from a couple different angles. That basic argument is that Islam, as it was understood during my time period of study, was much larger and more expansive than it is understood today, especially by Islamists and Salafis. Put more specifically, the forms of knowledge that the most learned scholars in Central Asia considered to be properly Islamic went far beyond scripture and Sharia, things we might more readily associate with religion today. One key to understanding how Islam as it used to be understood differed from many interpretations of modern Islamisms is the idea of Persianate high culture. So the word Persianate is kind of an invented term, is increasingly popular in academic circles, probably less well known elsewhere. But this table of contents from an encyclopedia from this time period is kind of helpful for cracking open what this idea is and why it's useful. So the basic idea of Persianate is fairly straightforward. The idea is that after an initial boom in the development of theology and law and scripture during the first few centuries of Islam, various other additional forms of knowledge were Islamized and fully incorporated into this larger Islamic tradition. Many of these Islamic fields, like the ones you see on the screen here, had roots that were originally outside of the Arabian Peninsula, but then from the 11th century onwards were generally written in Persian and layered on top of that existing intellectual tradition rather than displacing it. So complementing it rather than displacing it. I want to emphasize that many of these disciplines are probably not what comes first to mind when you think of religion or Islam. And you might, so us moderns might assume that they were somehow less religious or less Islamic from our modern perspective. But pre-modern Islamic scholars that I study absolutely consider them to be fully Islamic and inseparable from religion. I'll take a sort of, focus on one of these, occultism, to give an example of just how serious I am about this idea. So this is a Persian manuscript explaining how to predict the future, essentially. What this actually is the diagram of a shoulder bone of a sheep, right? And so which you can read in the colors and contours of it to predict what is going to happen. It's a kind of divination. But this was considered a properly Islamic science. Islamic scholars, the same people who mastered Sharia, Hadith, and all those other disciplines, introduced this science through reference to the Hadith, right? And so by interpreting it through the scriptures itself. This is an example of one of those layered on top auxiliary sciences written in Persian. So the diverse forms of knowledge that populate this table of contents, which is actually abbreviated, the real one that goes on for pages, were not separate from a formal madrasa education, but rather a part of it. So most of you will already know that a madrasa is essentially an Islamic college. Bukhara had an exceptional amount of them. This is an example. So again, the city of Bukhara boasted a massive madrasa establishment, over 200 of them. So it was a sort of quintessential Islamic college town. In the context of modern Afghanistan or South Asian studies, probably the term madrasa might bring to mind most readily something like the Deobandi madrasas. But actually, as Dr. Akhlaq sort of referenced in his talks in a more general term, a lot of these movements have very recent origins. And indeed, the Deobandi, according to, as is well known, was the Deobandi madrasa system was itself a reaction to colonialism in British India in the late 19th century. So the Deobandi educational system may have been fundamentalist in certain respects, but it was also, unlike what I'm describing here, and unlike in my own research, it was a reaction to colonialism, incorporating modern educational techniques and practices that are mostly absent in northern Afghanistan and Bukhara during the time period that I study in the late 19th century. So this is what the original madrasa sequence looked like. So becoming a member of the ulama, literally, which means those who know, meant mastering the full gamut of Perso-Islamic sciences. And you'll notice that people imagine in these madrasas that people were sitting around memorizing scripture. They were doing some of that, but the emphasis is overwhelmingly on reason, on logic and rhetoric, and how to actually think and learn to think for yourself. So these forms of knowledge were understood as intertwined elements of a cohesive whole, definitely not separable from religion. Now I emphasize all of this just to show you how radical a departure from the Perso-Islamic tradition, the Persian tradition idea of religion, that many, as has been pointed out many times, there's lots of different kinds of Islamism, but many of them are quite a radical departure from this tapestry of knowledge forms. So to emphasize, you get a sense of that from this slide, the ulama, the Islamic scholars at the center of my research, they're no slouches when it came to theology and law. They could recite the Hadith and the Quran backwards and forwards, and they could debate the finer points of Hanafi jurisprudence with the best of them. However, they did not share the near exclusive focus on those domains with their successors. So this is at the risk of oversimplification. In a way, what we see in the 20th century in the face of modernist movements writ large is a sort of shrinking of what was considered the domain of Islam for a learned person. So instead we shrink it, we preserve just part of that education. Which is to say, many Islamists, especially those influenced by Salafism, dispense with centuries of consensus, what had been completely normal for for several hundred years before that. Most notably, Sufism in its many guises was omnipresent in the pre-modern period. As in, literally every single Islamic scholar that I study was a Sufi in some sense of the term. It's a difficult term, we can talk about that, but Sufism as a phenomenon had come to just, had become fully internalized by the Islamic tradition. And so the skepticism or outright hostility that most Islamists treat Sufism with is quite a departure from the status quo of a learned member of the scholarly community. So let's move on. So what I'm getting at is this. With the focus on scripture and law, the exclusive focus on scripture and law of many Islamist movements, this represents an innovation. So this is a rough map of the territory where the forms of knowledge in that table of contents, people would have broadly agreed that that's what a learned person should know, right? It's a vast territory. People call the Balkans to Bengal complex sometimes for a reason. It's stretched that long. But it's also largely a thing of the past, because the intellectual consensus represented by the madrasa curriculum was what gave this territory coherence, right? It's an agreement about what a learned person should know that stretched over a huge space. That consensus has been shattered, and relatively recently at that, in the last century or so. So it gives you a sense of why people apply that ism on the end of Islamism, because it's so different from the Islam that came before. And my time remaining, if I have just a minute or two, I want to relate some of this to the question of Persian Islam in relation to politics and the state. So, in addition to being an educational center, so far I've been mostly talking about cultural, intellectual, and social history. In addition to that, Bukhara was also the capital of a country, an emirate, by the same name. And it was, its structure was broadly similar to some of the other polities that I had on the board a second ago, dynasties in Kunduz, especially in Badakhshan, for instance. And Bukhara was an Islamic state. It was not the Islamic state, obviously, but it was an Islamic state and understood as such. In Bukhara, there was only one kind of law, Sharia law, that was recognized as legitimate. Public administration in Bukhara matched a blueprint that had been, implicitly hammered out in legal and political manuals for centuries, featuring positions such as qazis and muftis and things like that. So this is a term. This is a term, muhtasib. It's a term that I've seen in the news recently in relation to Afghanistan, for instance, right? So you might be familiar with this public official of the Bukharan Emirate that you see on the screen, based on recent headlines. So the muhtasib was responsible for commanding right and forbidding wrong. So he was kind of a morality police. This was true in the Bukharan Emirate as well. So if to give an illustration, if an Islamic scholar from Bukhara were to travel into the future and observe the government of the Taliban in Afghanistan, they would understand quite a bit of what they saw, right? They would recognize at least some of those positions. They would be familiar with some of the same religious texts, at least especially the ones relating to law and scripture. However, the reverse is much less true. If a cleric from the Taliban's Afghanistan were to travel back in time to Bukhara in the 19th century, they would find something much more mysterious and probably distasteful as well, I would guess. This is because the model of a proper Islamic state was only one part of how the ulama understood the state in the pre-modern period. And this is, I think, an illustrative example. This is a typical preamble to a document. I'll be done in 1 second to explain this, right? Now, this gives us a sense of the sheer eclecticism, because this introduction of who the ruler is of Bukhara incorporates a lot of those forms of knowledge and disciplines and genres that were listed in that encyclopedia that I put on the screen. So, Commander of the Faithful, sure, that's a term that Kathya mentioned in relation to Morocco. So, someone an Islamist might recognize that quite well. But the rest is rooted in other disciplines that are part of Persian Islam, which again is stripped from most modernist understandings of Islam. So just to conclude, there's some continuities here. There's muhtasibs, for instance. There's morality police in places like Bukhara and Mazar-e-Sharif during the early modern period, for sure. But there were also Sufi leaders who led orders who challenged the ruler and offered advice. There were royal astrologers divining the future for the realm from the stars. There were courtly poets who drew ethics who drew inspiration from manuals on ethics and just kingship ruled in the Persianate tradition, without which you can't understand a statement like this. So, just to, that's the conclusion, right? So even when it comes to government, there are certain continuities, but it's limited to those areas where you see that were like scripture and hadith that were not stripped away by most Islamist movements. It was much broader, and it was completely normal for most of the pre-modern period. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I'm gonna just open up the conversation with a question to our panelists, and then we'll open up the floor. I'm wondering, these are such rich presentations, and they raised a common question for me that also was raised, I think, in the previous panel. I wonder if each of you can reflect a little bit on how you conceptualize the international relations of post-Islamists, particularly their relations with the non-Muslim world. And a historical reflection on this would also be welcome. If we understand Islamism, at least in part, as a reaction to empire, how is post-Islamism, this plurality of philosophies and social movements and civic organization, how is that in conversation right now with, for example, the war on terror, with Western efforts at democracy promotion, with countering violent extremism, and so on? Yeah, you can just go down.
I mean, so it's a very interesting question. Thank you very much. Maybe in my presentation, I didn't get a chance to talk a little bit about the Islamist experience, which may a little bit help understand that the Islamist experience in my country, Morocco, for example, where it's an interesting experience because the Islamists served for 2 terms. So they come in power peacefully and they left power peacefully, which is something to celebrate, I guess, at this point. So the experience is that they really have a very good connection, I think, with the international agenda. So many of the civil society organizations completely and directly linked to the Islamist Party were really working in close collaboration with international agenda when it comes to women's rights and human rights. And of course, they give it some kind of Islamist painting. So they would refer to women's rights vis-a-vis some kind of Islamic cultural understanding of what it meant to be a wife of a prophet or daughter of a prophet, which is normal and has its cultural and historical entrenchment in a country. So I would suppose also they worked in close collaboration with the idea of free market altogether and the capitalist economy. They did not have any kind of practical issue with that. Contrario, they felt that it spoke more to the core values of Islam when it comes to empowering economic spirit and the free trade and trading, and that the Prophet himself was someone who was very much involved in trade. So I feel that counterintuitively, the Islamists, at least in my experience in Morocco, they did not reject ideas, Western ideas altogether, and they dwelt with them somehow positively in most of the issues. Something a little bit at odds with that is that the Islamist experience came to an end in Morocco because of the election. They were not re-elected for a 3rd term, which I would think is a normal process in any kind of democracy. Morocco is not a full-fledged democracy. It's more on the gray zone of democracy, but at least it was a natural. But one of the things that really accelerates the process of them leaving power was the signing of the Abraham Accords. So this image of someone from the Islamist Party sitting next to senior security officials from the Israeli government and signing the Abraham Accord came as a shock for their supporters, because the Islamist parties, just a couple of months before the signing of the Abraham Accords, were in the streets chanting "At-tatbi' jarima," or normalization is a crime. So if you want, there is this kind of pushback when it comes to certain topics, and there is some kind of more intertwined relation. I think that the Islamist experience in Morocco proved that Islamic parties can be somehow pragmatic in dealing with issues of international agenda, while at the same time catering to the discourse of some of the bases, their electoral base.
I would like to share my last point and connected to your question. So my last point was that, so we have these two ambiguous ideas, Islamist and post-Islamist, but they are in some way useful to understand the reality, and we don't need to get rid of them. But however, I think we need to keep in mind that we are not passing Islamist period, but it's weakening and it become weaker than before. So what does post-Islamist means in this context? It means that opening new horizon for Muslim and for the world to see Muslim. That's the only things that I can say. With regard to that, getting back to your question about relationship between Muslim and non-Muslim, particularly in post-Islamist era. In Islamist era, as I said, it's by its nature is a reaction to colonization, and there is a very good insight of Nietzsche philosophers saying if somebody goes to fight against demon, there is a chance that the person gets attributes of the demon because get involved with that. And Islamist group, they get a lot of attributes of the colonizing power. One of them was othering. So because of that, if I look at Muslim, so non-Muslim before Islamization was more respected by Muslim, but after Islamization, they were mostly other. With regard to post-Islamism, there is a chance because there is actually a crack on the Islamism, so there is an openness to other. But there is we don't need to be very positive because another problem with the post-Islamism is the issue of the identity. And identity in Islam and in every culture in some way associated with distancing yourself from others to be yourself. And that opens new way of the post-Islamist othering or something that we need to talk more about that. That's my point.
I think maybe I'll refrain from answering that one because it goes beyond my own area of expertise.
The floor is open. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Syed Jawad with the American University of Afghanistan. My question is for Ms. Berrrada. Considering the three facts, the king being almost French from his upbringing and his fact, now claiming to be a descendant of Prophet Muhammad and Amir al-Mu'mineen, considering that most Islamic parties, and especially in Morocco and all over the Arabic world, have lost actually power and popularity. My question is to the civil society now. The part of the civil society that try to accomplish their civic goals by justifying it through Islamic means, what's the difference between them and the king? Are they really civil societies? So, just a simple question. Why don't they stand for principles? On the long term, the question, on the long term, is the Moroccan society, other societies, Islamic societies are better off when there is a clear break and it says this is not what the teaching of the religion is, and that's not actually what the principles of the civil society and civic living is. Thank you.
So first, I mean, when it comes to the upbringing, because for most of royalties and the Moroccan monarchy is not an exception, the image is very important. So of course, he has a lot of elements of Western education into his making. But the role of madrasa, James was talking about madrasa, is so very much preserved within the monarchy. So this couple of 3 years, like you would have the kings and all the small princes going to the madrasa from within the palace and learning and memorizing the Quran and memorizing the Bukhari. And the image is so important. You have no idea. For all the different celebration in Morocco, we will have them on the news that they have learned and memorized Quran. Is it genuine or is it a part of preserving this title of Imarat al-Mu'mineen? This is something that I leave to the better judgment of everyone. So that's number one. And number two, in most of countries where democracy is not yet there as a full-fledged thing, and I'm not even sure that it is in anywhere else, but it's a work in progress and something that needs to be redefined and worked for and fought for constantly. civil society organization resembles a lot of other aspects in the society. So there is an element of engineering the civil society, engineering it by a top-down approach where we really are sure to have different fractions of civil society that are opposing each other. So for example, when it comes to women's rights, you have civil society organizations that are more on the liberal leaning, and they would be even going as far as militant and advocating the right of the LGBTQ community, which is sometimes at odds with what you would believe in a country like Morocco. And at the same time, you have other fraction of civil society which would be extremely traditionalist and close to that. And that kind of polarization is also helpful when you have semi-authoritarian regimes, because it's important to keep things very, very fragmented. I believe that the importance of having pluralistic views is important, but when the level of polarization is so high to construct anything, it is very difficult to envision like a greater role in that. We see more and more the emergence of a more genuine civil society organizations, more genuine in the sense that they are not engineered, but they are coming as a crystallization of the orientation of society. And that is thanks mainly to social media platforms that made it possible for the younger generation to organize beyond what would be the tide that are upon them, either by the regime or by the social and the cultural norms.
Maybe we'll collect a few questions and then come back to the panel.
Thank you. I had a question from.
And please introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Zainab Perzad, a media consultant at IWPR. I have a question from Dr. Saeed Hassan. My question is, you were mentioned that to shift from Islamic to post-Islamic, we need to know about Islam. So I need a little more clarification about these. Do you mean about the life experience to live in an Islamic country and move to post-Islamic, or is going to study academically or whatever, like going to study Sharia or Fiqh or going to madrasa? And also, you were saying that Taliban is a reality. So my question is the Taliban is a reality of Islam? Thank you.
We're just going to collect some.
Thank you very much for this. I will go to Dr. Pickett. You talked about, and to everyone, and hark back to Asif Bayat as a writer on post-Islamism. He described it as a process of secularization rather than secularism, which means that it goes beyond religious sources and religious knowledge to non-religious to make use of this. And you talked about the madrasa and the way they incorporated non-religious knowledge in it. And this is actually the trend nowadays. Like I'll speak about Al-Azhar University, for example, that they are lessening, or they are increasing the amount of social science knowledge at the expense of the religious knowledge. How is that impacting what's happening in the world? Those are the people, the ulama, for example, are the people who produce knowledge. How is that impacting the way the grassroots and everyone think and act accordingly in the world? Thank you.
My name is Jahid. I work at CNAS. We have a saying in Farsi says, "Hay rama tawajogu bagusfand khud." It means a shepherd or every shepherd pays more attention on his own sheep. In the current situation of the world, I am asking about the future of Afghanistan. I have a question from Ms. Kathya from Al Maghreb. As we are all sure, at least I am sure, that the Taliban would be in the after the stopping of regional and international financial and political support, and we would have a bright future in Afghanistan, inshallah, in 3 or 4 years. On that situation, unfortunately, we would face at least 300,000 extremist young generation who are going to be educated in the current madrasas. As you said about مصالحة في المغرب, or reconciliation in Al Maghreb society, do you think that it would be a good prescription for the the challenge we would have between the young generation who knows about the international laws, who knows about the humanity, and those other 300,000, around 300,000 extremist young generation who are being taught by Haqqani madrasas or the same extremist madrasas that they switched from Karachi and in other part of, we know from Pakistan and then inside Afghanistan. Do you think that Musalaha would be a way for making a bright future of Afghanistan? Because we cannot kill all of 300,000 young generation of Afghanistan because they are our people and they are our population. We cannot put all of them in jail as we had the same experience in the past 20 years. We had some students from Jamaat Ikhwan al-Muslimin and also Hizb al-Tahrir from different places, but the government put all of them in jail. They didn't let them to have a conference between the civil society of Afghanistan and them. This can be from Kathya or the Professor Said Hassan. What do you think about that? Is Musalaha or reconciliation a good way for making a bright future in Afghanistan, or still, if in the future we should put them all in jail? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One more question? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Zubair, and just a political activist. My question is for Dr. Pickett. The things that you mentioned regarding Hanafi Islam and how the contrast between them and the Deobandi version with the Taliban in Afghanistan. I found that interesting, and regarding the only active group that I see that's making a push in kind of a revival for your entire presentation is actually the current resistance to the Taliban, led by Ahmed Massoud. And this is something within their writings that they mentioned that like going back to incorporating a rational form of Islam would be beneficial for the country. And I think that basically my question is, how much support do you think that this concept would get from academic circles or the rest of other Islamic institutions in the world who typically, they have a sort of backlash towards the alternative of when we say we don't want the Taliban, they think that, oh, well, it's the alternative is liberal democracy, right? So if we're going to be pushing for a rational version of Islam, is that something that would be supported as an alternative?
Okay, so we have about 6 minutes or so. So if each of you could take a minute, James, maybe we'll start with you this time and respond to whatever you can.
Yeah, thank you for these great questions. The first point about first one was a nice opening just to reemphasize that when I'm showing all of these different parts of the madrasa curriculum and suggesting that originally they had different origins, I'm not saying that, so they were understood to be Islamic, right, and inseparable from it. So, I think if you take something like Al-Azhar, like you look at a modern religious institution, there is an idea, okay, these are the religious sciences and these are the non-religious sciences that we're bringing in. That really wasn't how they saw things. I mean, you look at the first couple of years, they're reading, they're doing rhetoric and logic, like balagha, like sciences like that. Those came from, those are built on top of translations from the Greek. Right, but if you told them, "Oh, look at this is a non-religious outside science that's coming from the Greeks," they'd think you're out of your mind. I mean, that's what they spent they spent a decade studying these things. Those were the keys to unlocking religion, which was seen all as cohesive and all part of the same, part of the same coin. And the same went for the types of sciences that were written in Persian, more predominantly, such as like Tasawwuf, Sufism, but also medicine and so forth. Even medicine would not have been seen as separable from religion exactly. So a great question, but yeah, so I would just say that there's a pretty radical break in terms of how these things were understood. As in today, it's very natural to us to think in terms of, it's very easy to say this is religion, that's not religion, but that's not like there wasn't such a separation back in the time period that I look at. The other question is much more is challenging. A great question, but very challenging. I guess that. I would, so when you're a historian and you look at this material and you use these concepts to make sense of it in the first place, but then there's it's the way it's received and the way people might use it, right? Like and to find it useful. And I don't strongly. So you mentioned, like, it is true that I put that on that slide on the board and emphasized the sort of the logic and the rationality. But if you're to say, so therefore Persianate type of Islam is more rational than other kinds, I wouldn't really agree with that. Like, I wouldn't disagree with it. I mean, they certainly cared about like rational sciences, but I wouldn't agree with it either, because there's also a very strong tradition of, say, like Qalandar type Sufis, right? Like who base their authority on direct experience of the divine, right? So it's distinct from a rational science, not in a pejorative way, but that has equal standing in the tradition. And then, as far as like, so how well this, whether this like revivalism, I mean, gosh, that's so interesting. I really don't know. Although I would say that the trend towards scripturalism, as I think someone else in a previous remarks pointed out, is certainly not unique to Islam, and that seems to be a feature of modernity, like in all religions. So so a reversion away from that, yeah, maybe it's possible, but that would go against the current of what I see in all religions practically. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, right. So with regard to the first question, so when we are talking about Islam, what is our source? The real experience of the everyday Muslims, or what we learn from Texas? I think this is one of the dangerous binary we are making. So there is a connection and actually mutual impact between everyday life of Muslim and the Texas. So we cannot say that just Texas, because texts are read and interpreted by Muslim. And we have a axiom in religious studies saying that the meaning of the religious texts is what people believe in that religion say, not what the words say by themselves. So that's a very connection. And this is one, again, I would like to emphasize, there is no sharp distinction between reality of the life of Muslim and Texas. They reflect on each other, and they, throughout history, they learn how to work together. Let's give you an example. So the largest school of the jurisprudence in Islam is Hanafi school. And another name for the school is people of the opinion, or Ahlul Ray. Means Imam Abu Hanifa didn't believe in hadith. Ibn Khaldun says he believed in less than 20 hadith. So, and what does people of the opinion means? He just tried to make a conclusion based on the reasoning, based on the experience, life experience, and like that. But this is one example of the wide spectrum of Islam. We have very textualist people that say, no, Islam is hadith, Islam is Quran. And what is Islam? Let's connect it with your second question. If Taliban is reality of Islam, Taliban is a part of reality of Islam, as Rumi is a reality of Islam. We are not allowed to reduce Islam to Taliban, neither Sufis or Rumi or Avicenna. So the problem with the Islamist group, anti-Islamist group, or let's put it this way, actually people who promote Islam a lot of times, Puritan Islam and anti-Islam group, both share in this idea that they believe there is a particular nature for Islam. One love it, one hate it, but it's not actually like that. So that's what I wanted to say. Taliban are Muslim, but they are not the only Muslim. They are Muslim and many things else. Tribal elements, regional conflict, many other things. Like Masood is Muslim, but there is other elements in that. Like Sufis, like other Muslim. The question, if we can reconcile, I don't know any other option. So we cannot, actually, as I said, we cannot get affected by demons and get their tools to defeat them. Then there is a chance we become demons. We have to find a way like that.
Yeah, on that point, yeah, if there is a possibility of the Musalaha, I can go about technicality of the Musalaha program in Morocco, but we wouldn't have time for that. But just Musalaha, the word in Arabic, has the
meme and in all the ishtiqaq and derivation, that means some form of dynamic. When you have a word that is al-mukashafa, you were speaking about it, so, or al-musalaha, so that means it takes two to dance, or so the musalaha, the reconciliation, is the person who is a jihadi, Salafi, terrorist, with society. So both parties have to be ready for the program. And I feel that it has prospects, and maybe it is the only prospects to have something. I mean, I can answer on the technicality of how the Musalaha program, I think, was somehow successful in Morocco because it was inclusive. It included the imams, but it also included civil society, and it did not undermine the role of the economic integration of those people. So I feel there were many elements, the fact that it was something that was done in consultation with different parts of society, but the most important is going back to the root word Arabic, the musalaha, the fact that both parties have to be ready for it. Society has to be ready to accept that it is part of a historical development, and the person has to be ready to give up and to reconcile with society as well.
Well, thank you. This has been such a rich conversation. We could go on for hours, but I think it's time for lunch. And so I'm going to pass back to our moderator with profound thanks to our panelists and to Muradian Saib and his team for this amazing gathering. Thank you.